Prapiroon and Gaemi typhoon threats in the Western Pacific on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 21st. Two tropical storms in the Western Pacific are eyeing up the coastlines of Asia. Prapiroon heading in towards Hainan, and Gaemi, skimming the Philippines on its way to Taiwan, could become a powerful typhoon. We're tracking it live on our automated tracker on the Force 13 channel. We're code orange for these storms right now, but first of all, looking at the Atlantic on day 51 of hurricane season, there's no areas of interest, which is nice to see. Nothing expected either in the next 7 days, which we'll take that. We'll be happy with that for the next little while there, a quiet basin after what we saw, the craziness at the start of the month. In the Eastern Pacific, we're on day 67 now, and there is still one area of interest, that 20% area. Some models haven't given up on, the GFS and I think it was the CMC that still have it there, developing into a tropical storm within the next 7 days. Of course, in the Western Pacific, we have these two tropical storms now. Prapiroon heading in, strengthening slowly, and Gaemi strengthened quite a bit yesterday, but it's holding right now, probably around 60 miles per hour, and it is just off the coast of Luzon, and that is heading northwards. In the North Indian Ocean, we've got no areas of interest to talk about right now. It's a quiet basin, although quiet in that sense, but not in another sense, where there's still a lot of precipitation over the region right now, all across India and over parts of Myanmar. And in the southwest Indian Ocean, for what it's worth, well, here's a little look at it. A few clouds over the Seychelles, out over the open Indian Ocean as well, but the rest of the basin is dreadfully quiet, as you would expect at this time of year. So let's take a closer look at Gaemi then. Here it is, tropical storm not far from the Philippines, 240 kilometers from Palanan, 319 from Tuguegarao, 477 from Basco on the Batanes Islands, could be affected by tropical storm force winds. Ishigaki, 819 kilometers, that's southern Japan, and 950 kilometers from Taipei, the capital of Taiwan. All of the Batanes, Taiwan, the southernmost Ryukyu Islands should be watching out for this storm. Could deliver, probably will deliver tropical storm force winds. The big question is whether and where the typhoon force winds will end up. Well, here's Prapiroon, currently 127 kilometers from Sanya on the southern coast of Hainan. It looks like it's going to make landfall there pretty soon. 272 kilometers from Haikou, that's on the northern coast. 408 from Zhanjiang on the mainland. 538 from Haiphong in Vietnam, and 591 kilometers from Macau in, of course, that territory there to the northeast. The storm is expected to move north-northwest, although the forecast, even for this one, is proving to be a little bit tricky as well. Let's check the latest satellite imagery then of the two storms, and you can see them side by side on the same frame here. The one on the left, of course, Prapiroon, getting very close to that landfall already by the looks of things, and Gaemi there. From what we've been seeing, it still looks like it's moving more towards a westerly direction, which is bringing it closer to the Philippines than expected. We are looking at possibly a little bit of a stalling motion now in the next 24 hours before it starts to move more decidedly towards the north and then curve towards Taiwan. Both of them have some work to do to become better, but obviously Gaemi is looking on its way a little bit further on down the line than Prapiroon is. Here's Prapiroon right now. A lot of dry air towards its east there, and a big gap on the north and western side right now, but blowing up some decent convection near the centre, but indicated winds are probably still close to only 45 miles per hour, somewhere around there, an estimated pressure of 993 millibars. Here's some radar imagery, and I think this is still quite broken, so just take a look at the structure there in isolation of where it actually is on the map, and you can see that it is starting to look a little bit better there as it moves northwestwards with a bit of a core forming on the western side. Now this is Gaemi there, and it is still quite vulnerable there to being exposed by the looks of things. There's a big convective burst throughout the day, and as we enter the evening hours now, you can see that it is fading off a little bit again. So we'll have to wait to see what happens overnight and whether a new convective burst will begin and whether it will start to get going. Clearly here looking like it's sheared from the northeastern side there, which is preventing strengthening right now. Some models suggested that strengthening would happen much more quickly by now, and so wind shear is holding it back and may hold back the final intensity of this storm when it ends up towards Taiwan, which is obviously good news. Here's a look at another Invest 93W, which is just off the coast of Guam right now, off to the northwest there, blowing up some decent convection, but in the influence of Gaemi in the background on the left there, it's going to really struggle for a long time. Let's take a look at some of our other satellite imagery views. Here's off the east coast of the United States, a big front moving off the coast there from Florida out through the Carolinas and out over the western Atlantic. Here's the Caribbean Sea. What you can't see on this imagery, but we have seen it in the previous updates, is that there's tons of Saharan dust and dry air around the eastern part of the Caribbean into the western Atlantic. And in this region too, you can even see it on the unenhanced visible there of Africa. Now this is the eastern Pacific. You can see a few little areas trying to blow up. The area of interest that we've got is towards the bottom left there of Mexico and off towards the open Pacific. A decent looking system down there towards the bottom left of the Central Pacific there as well. Perhaps might want to get marked, maybe a 10% on that one coming up, but it shouldn't develop. Here's the Western Pacific, wide view of the whole region, and you can just see a very sloppy situation across the whole basin right now amongst our tropical storms. Prapiroon there on the right hand side into the Indian Ocean, a lot of monsoonal showers pushing across India from Myanmar and spilling over into the Arabian Sea as well. Quite a few clouds and rain there as well still. Well, sea surface temperatures are still climbing in the eastern Pacific, and in fact it's climbed quite a bit since the last week or so. Temperatures pushing over 30 degrees Celsius now in a few spots off Mexico. Gulf of Mexico is still very hot right now, off the coast of Florida especially now, with pushing 32 degrees Celsius, and in the Keys and Florida Bay. Western Cuba as well, extremely warm, and over the open Atlantic, huge amounts of warm water there now at the storm's disposal. Similarly in the Western Pacific, very high temperatures, up to 32 degrees ahead of Gaemi, and for Prapiroon into the Gulf of Tonkin as well, pushing 32 degrees. In the North Indian Ocean, a little spot there of over 30 degrees Celsius off the coast of Odisha and West Bengal, and in the Arabian Sea it's a bit half and half. Compared to average, it looks like this. The Atlantic is very much above average, in particular the tropical zones, up to 3 or 4 degrees above average, and in the subtropical zones even more actually. In the Eastern Pacific, quite decent there, above average as a general rule, and in the Western Pacific we've still got decent temperatures there as well. The subtropics though, taking it there in terms of the highest temperatures from Taiwan eastwards. That will obviously help Gaemi. Looking at the oceanic heat content, there's still a lot of it there in the Western Pacific, the Philippine Sea, where Gaemi is right now, on the edge of some very high values, and they'll get higher as it moves northwards towards Taiwan. Prapiroon not so much, Eastern Pacific not so much either. The Atlantic still building here as well across the Caribbean Sea, from Jamaica through to the Yucatan in particular, but also east of there and in parts of the Gulf of Mexico. Looking really good, lots of energy, and we should be seeing some more big activity in the Atlantic based on those numbers. But not anytime soon, according to the computer models. Here's the GFS. We're first looking at the Eastern Pacific for this potential system developing. And there it is, right in the middle of the picture now, moving westwards, eventually developing into a tropical storm. That's the 20% that we've marked there towards the end of that 5-day period. So we're looking at mid to late week, this system developing into a tropical storm. If it does so, and if it does, it will be small. Could intensify quite quickly because it is small, but it is away from many land areas. Western Pacific, Prapiroon moving over Hainan there, swiveling around a little bit, then eventually into China towards the east there. It takes an easterly track, and then of course Gaemi there, a large system it ends up turning out to be, probably because it's stalling quite a bit there in these latest runs, and you can see it eventually really blowing up and moving on towards the northern part of Taiwan as a large typhoon, but not particularly strong, maybe category 2, but showing now that it is expected to be quite large as it wraps up all of that cloud and rain off to its east, I suppose. Well, in terms of rainfall, you may remember yesterday when the track changed and it put Taiwan in very little rainfall areas. Well, it's flipped back again today, so we're looking at very high amounts of rain for Taiwan and also for Hainan and the Philippines. The byproduct from Gaemi there. In fact, the Philippines may get the highest amount of rain there. That's 900 millimeters there in northwestern Luzon, and very similar amounts in Taiwan as well. I remember going back to Nipatak in 2016, that delivered similar amounts of rainfall to Taiwan. It was just over 900 millimeters. Well, this is the medium range then, day 5 to 10, watching that storm moving on through the eastern Pacific again into the central Pacific. It drops back down again, weakens, it loses it. It could be a brief hurricane there, a very small system, it has to be said, and then eventually drifts back down towards the southwest, loses itself there, probably drops back into the intertropical convergence zone, well to the south of Hawaii. And here's the western Pacific, the latter part of Gaemi there, moving inland over China, disintegrating, and then another system tries to form off the back of that. Very sloppy system that tries to become a strong tropical storm, would deliver some widespread winds and probably some more heavy rainfall there, even though it doesn't look like it manages to fully become a tropical cyclone, doesn't wrap all the way around. We tend to see this kind of thing at this time of year, a lot of sloppy systems. That could even be Invest 93W, actually, come to think of it there, as we watch that later part of the run. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. Our Still Waiting for a Hode t-shirt is still available as well, which is just amazing, dazzling. Well, in the silly range, and it is silly for a reason, day 10 to 16, well, what do we have? It's an Eastern Pacific storm that forms up again. It is almost silly to think that we'll ever see an Eastern Pacific storm at this point. In fact, there's two there that form briefly, a southern one there as well, up to the end of that 16-day period. The northern one, though, probably has a better chance becoming a substantial hurricane towards the end of that loop there, but it is right towards the end. That's well into the first week of August, eventually moving westwards, possibly tropical storm force winds for Baja California. Western Pacific, there's possibly rumours or rumblings of some other developments here, but they are well out to sea. You can see one or two systems there trying to develop on the conveyor belt there along that front, around probably a big subtropical ridge there, trying to develop into substantial tropical cyclones. Doesn't really look like they have much success, certainly compared to what we were looking at on yesterday's model run at this point, which had something a little bit more formidable than what this is showing. So in short, the long range not looking very good for anywhere. Back to what happened on this day, and it was a big typhoon impact that got the name retired, Typhoon Imbudo, which was about to make landfall in Luzon in the Philippines. It was a category 4 on this day as it was making its run up to land. We also had Typhoon Koni, which later became Goni, moving into the coast of China, quite similar to Prapiroon right now actually. We also had Tropical Depression 6 in the Atlantic, Danny's remnants are out up there as well in the subtropical zones, and Tropical Depression Felicia, which if I recall was dying out there in the Eastern Pacific. So a serious situation right now. We have been considering live coverage for a while. We're still not sure whether we're going to do any today. We'll let you know on our social media outlets. But the next name in the Atlantic is Debbie, the Eastern Pacific it's Bud, and in the Central Pacific it is Hone. In the Western Pacific, the next name now is Maria, that old chestnut once again. In the North Indian Ocean, the next name is Asna. 26 storms so far around the world. We're still limping very far behind the average and behind even the quietest seasons of the satellite era so far in the year. In the Australian region, the next name is Robin. Southwest Indian Ocean starts with Ansha, and in the South Pacific it will be Pitta. That's it from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow. Become an Ultimate Fan today.